The Bugs Are Getting Bigger by JICMike. Have you noticed that the bugs have gotten bigger, or is it just me? I don't remember who said it at work, but it stuck with me as I finished my workup. It was such a nonchalant phrase, too, like it was just a teeny little afterthought. I hated bugs as they were right now, except for maybe ladybugs, which seemed cool. I shuddered at the thought of the phrase and moved on with my day. I pushed it out of my mind and thought about other things. What I'd fix for supper, what I should write about in my journal, and other things of this sort. Anything to keep my mind away from big bugs. I can't say I'm the most observant of people, but a few weeks ago, I saw a jumping spider in my driveway, the size of a silver dollar. Mind you, where I live, they're only ever the size of pennies. Seeing one that big scared the shit out of me. I kept my distance, but the last thing I wanted was this fuzzy asshole leaping onto my leg and making me scream so loud that I woke up the neighbors. It was large, yes, but it wasn't unusual to me. In my opinion, all spiders looked too big to me. The next day, my neighbor George knocks on my door and says, "You ain't gonna believe this." "What is it?" I said. He's got this wide grin on his face, damn near giddy, like a kid who just found something he wasn't supposed to. He waved me on. "Come here, follow me. Man, I hope it ain't flown off yet." I slipped on my flip-flops and followed him into his backyard. Once he opened the gate and pointed towards it, my jaw dropped at a cricket that was the size of a puppy. The giant insect was munching away at his tomato bush. Its hind legs rubbed together to create a surprisingly brassy chirp. Cool, huh? Sure, if you think that creepy bugs are cool. You think if I start feeding it stuff, you think it'd stick around like a pet? Knock yourself out. That night, the usual gentle sounds of crickets were replaced by tons of loud chirps, as brazen as duck or goose calls. I stuffed earplugs into my head and cranked the ambient music up to the max. I woke up to a dog screaming, a sound that'd make anyone's blood chill. It was a distinct, fearful yelping. I got out of my bed and looked out my bedroom window to see my other neighbor, Clara's dog, a bulldog, writhing in the grass. Something shiny and black wrapped around it, giant pinchers snipping at the nape of his neck. It was a fucking centipede. I ran from my bed, slipped on my shoes, and rushed outside. That dog may have woken me up in the middle of the damn night sometimes, but no one's pet deserves that shit. I hopped the fence and ran to the dog. The centipede was digging its prongs into the fur, the hundreds of pencil-like legs caressing the body frantically. I gripped it, and it felt so wrong. Whenever you pick up a bug, it'll feel funny because animals are usually furry or tough-feeling. Bugs are different because they're hard as a rock, but light as a feather. When I grabbed the centipede, it had heft to it, like I was picking up a snake. I heard a voice. "What the fuck?" she said. It was Clara, staring in horror at me, prying this bug away from her dog. I swear, as I was tearing it away, the pincher started to dig deeper into the fur. The blood is dying into the white fur of the dog. With one last rip, I tore it from the dog and the pinchers took a scrap of flesh with it. As I held it in my hands, it writhed wildly, its legs flickering up and down. I hoisted it overhead and chucked it over the fence and towards the road, hoping some poor asshole might run it over and have to clean his wheels. Clara rushed to her dog's side and looked at the wounds. "The fuck was that?" she screamed. "What in God's name was that?" "I don't know," I said. "It had to have been some sort of freak centipede or whatever the hell." "Listen, thank you, Bert." "Of course, just take him to a vet right away." She nodded and sprinted towards her car. A trail of dog blood trailed her. The next day, before I went off to work, I tended to my garden, and beneath the dirt, something huge stirred. The skin broke the surface of the loose dirt, and I saw a large, slimy, ringed body. It was unmistakably an earthworm, but this was also something massive. I was thinking about touching it, but then it sank beneath the dirt. When I returned to work, everyone was gathered around at a meeting discussing marketing a new deodorant that was scented after Bradford pear trees. I asked everyone if they've smelled a Bradford pear tree, and they said no. When I told them what it smelled like, it sent them spiraling on how to market it. We took a brief break, and while I was sitting near a window, checking emails, I heard a helicopter going by. Only when I looked outside did I not see any helicopters, but I heard the heavy thud of propellers. Then I saw the June bug, its greenish blue shell shimmering under the hot sun. It looked regular-sized at first glance, and that's when I realized it was very far away. Its wings were fluttering so loudly that they sounded like a helicopter. I lifted my phone to take a picture of it, and that's when it flew towards me. It wasn't out to get me, so to speak, but rather it was just aimlessly flying around. When it flew close to the window, its true size was revealed to me. It hovered next to me. The flapping wings rose and fell, fast and loudly, rattling the windows. The June bug was about the size of a vulture. The wingspan was unnaturally large. And seeing it up close, the giant dangling legs beneath it like pendulums, it acknowledged its reflection for a brief moment and buzzed away. When I drove back home, I saw flashing lights surrounding a car wreck. On the road, I saw an overturned car, and next to it was a rhino beetle the size of a horse, filled with bullet holes. Greenish pus oozed from the holes and dribbled onto the asphalt. I rolled down my window and asked the officer, "Hey, what the hell happened here?" The officer looked back at the scene and returned his tired eyes to me. "Been getting calls like this all week, but the guys at the station thought it was some sort of elaborate prank. Then we got a call about a beetle flipping a car. When we arrived, we didn't expect to see that thing running about. It charged at us, and we just opened fire." "Are there any others like that? Big bugs? I don't know. Maybe." He motioned me on, and I went home. I had a hard time falling asleep for obvious reasons. I don't know what the hell was happening to the world around me. These insignificant little insects that skulked about beneath our feet were just getting bigger and bigger by the day. I was on the verge of sleep when I heard something push open my door. I looked up from my sheets, and I saw something gazing at me from the doorway. It filled the frame. The body was immense, and in the dark, I couldn't tell what it was. I put on my glasses and grabbed my phone. I turned on the light and illuminated the enormous dark shape in front of me, and I wish I hadn't. The jumping spider had returned. Part 2. I was lying in bed, frozen stiff at what I was looking at. A giant jumping spider filled the doorway of my bedroom. Its little front-facing pinchers felt around in the air silently, and with one swift movement, it squeezed through the door. The hinges popped, and the door fell to the wayside with a thud. I remained still, but I was definitely trembling. Sweat was forming on my skin like beads, tears filled my eyes, and I tried disassociating from this very moment. Then I remembered that I had a gun stored at my bedside table, just in case. Fear has a way of making people forget about what's around them. A hunter could be cornered by a bear and forget about the rifle in his hand. I looked at my bedside drawer, and I slowly crept my hand beneath the covers, making my way to the drawer. My eyes never left the spider, and my hand felt the air beside me until I felt the handle of the drawer. The spider was still, eerily still, I pulled open the drawer slowly, making sure that I didn't make a sound. By some miracle, I was able to open it, and from the corner of my eye, I saw a faint glint of something shiny. I looked for a brief moment and saw my pistol lying there. When I looked back at the spider, it was at the foot of my bed. I didn't even hear it inch closer. Upon closer look, I saw it in much more vivid detail. What used to be beady eyes were large, wet orbs, and the small, fuzzy legs were now large sticks covered in spindles. The pincers that waved in the air were suddenly now tugging away at my sheets. I gripped the handle, and as I was ready to thrust in front of this thing's face and fire, my phone started emitting a loud noise. The spider was startled at the sound and reared backwards. I was hoping that maybe it was scared off, but as I looked at its movements, it was not backing away. It was prepping to lunge. I threw the gun in front of me as it pounced. Its huge body looms in the tiny room like a massive shadow. I fired. Pow! 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 The body was so much heavier than I would have imagined it. It felt like a large, uncomfortable dog had laid upon my chest. As it writhed atop of me, I felt warm gunk spilling out of the bullet holes and onto my bedspread, soaking into my pajamas. I wanted to keep firing, but my arm was pinned underneath the damn thing. Then, by some miracle, it died on top of me. I shoved the thing off of me. It took both my arms and legs to push it off. As it landed to the side, its legs spasmed and began to curl into itself. "Fuck you!" I shouted at it. I got out of my bed, sheets soaked through with foul-smelling blood or whatever the fuck. It got into my pajamas, and I felt the wet cloth clinging to my skin. I grabbed fresh clothes, my phone, and my gun, and ran to the bathroom. I may be in some sort of freaky hellscape with giant bugs, but I'll be damned if I have to smell like that while I do so. I locked the door behind me and stripped the wet, stinking pajamas from myself. I sat on the toilet to check whatever the fuck caused that noise. When I turned it on, it was the emergency alert system, and in all caps it read, "President declares national emergency. Citizens to stay inside their homes. This is not a drill." I took a shower and put on fresh clothes. I stuffed the pistol into my right pants pocket and my phone into the left one. When I emerged from the bathroom, I walked back to the spider, and I breathed a sigh of relief when it hadn't moved. It was definitely dead. I raised the blinds and peered outside. In the sky, I saw these monolithic car-sized beetles and flies the size of motorcycles. I heard a rumble over my house, and when I looked up, I saw the scrawny, spindly body of a dragonfly passing overhead, its massive wings rattling my windows. I went on social media, and what I saw scared me. I only looked for a brief second, but there were hundreds of posts all over the world, and people were writing so many different things. "Staying in your homes is a death trap. They know how to get in. Locked doors won't stop them. The government is lying to you. You can't hide. Where is the military? I didn't vote for this." And so on. So here I was, trapped in my house and completely unsure of how to go about this new bug apocalypse that's seemingly taking over the world. I ventured out into the rest of my house until I was stopped in my tracks, realizing that, apart from my bedroom, this spider had been weaving webs while I slept. What disturbed me the most was that there were things trapped within them, husks of what used to be people and animals. I saw George, and next to him was a dog-sized grasshopper that wore a collar. Then I saw Clara. She was wrapped up with her dog, her face of anguish frozen stiff. There were other large bugs in there too, a ladybug with a bright red shell, and a stink bug that had been gutted. And as you can imagine, my house smelled absolutely rancid. I looked online to see what people around the world were saying about the emergency, and many told me to just keep moving. Evidently, the people who stayed bunkered down in their houses met horrifying fates. There were videos of people getting mauled by hordes of cockroaches, houses infested by a pack of fleas, mosquitoes piercing through houses like woodpeckers to skewer their prey, and yes, there are more spiders out there taking up residence in folks' homes. At times like this, I wonder if folks with doomsday bunkers are pumping their fists and shouting at people, telling them, "I told you so." One post in particular took me by surprise. Evidently, people are going to the coast and getting into yachts or cruise liners. These massive boats would be docked until the end of the week, which meant I only had 6 days to get to the coast. It sounded too good to be true, but what else was I supposed to do? Wait at home and get eaten by another spider? No fucking thanks. I reached out to one of the owners of the yachts, whose name was Tim, and he said he'd be somewhere in North Carolina, and said that his boat would be hard to miss. He told me that it was white with bright green highlights, and that it was called the Samsa. My plan was simple but incredibly flawed. Get in my car and stick to the roads, but not the highways. Drive literally everywhere except where traffic might get congested. Roads less traveled, so to speak. Hopefully, I'd make it in time before the ships set their sails. I grabbed my keys and tiptoed through my house and tried not to get caught in the silvery rope-like webs that were strung about in my house. Then, when I thought I was in the clear, I felt something drip onto my shoulder. I patted it, and slime trailed from it. It looked like some sort of sticky saliva. I looked up and saw a brood of not-so-small baby spiders above me. They swarmed about silently, each one the size of a puppy or maybe a large cat. I was frozen stiff and tried to back away toward the back door, yet, as I stepped backwards, one of my shoes got stuck. I looked down to see I was firmly stepping on a web, and when I looked back at the spiders, they were descending upon me, dangling from rope-like webs. I decided in that moment that I could live with only one shoe, and that if I stopped anywhere, I'd find myself something. I undid my laces and pulled my foot free as I saw one of them land and started skittering towards me. I withdrew my pistol and fired into its face. It twitched and slumped to the floor, but it didn't stop the rest. I scrambled to my feet and ran away from them. I stumbled briefly, and my left hand went into the cold guts of the stink bug, kicking up an intensely repulsive smell. I kept on until I found the back door, and what made it so terrifying to me was that as I was running, they were so quiet. I didn't know how close they were until I turned around. They were so close. I threw myself outside, and the babies didn't follow, almost like the sun hurt their eyes. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. I wiped the stink bug guts onto the grass as I was gasping for fresh air. Compared to the damp, rank smells of the inside, I was so happy to be outside. I went to my shed in the back to grab another weapon. As much as I wished my gun had infinite ammo, I knew that sooner or later I'd run out of bullets. I opened the shed and looked at all the tools at my disposal, and I decided to take my wood-splitting axe with me. I ran to my car and turned it on, and I've never been more thankful to see a full tank of gas in my entire life. I pulled out of my driveway, and at first I thought that maybe the giant jumping spider was the only thing in my neighborhood that was dangerous. But as I drove past the houses in the daylight, I saw the horror of my new reality, and dread washed over me in great, intense waves. I saw beetles resting in the collapsed ruins of houses, the dirt in yards warping and ripping as great earthworms moved beneath our feet. I saw giant ants creating an anthill that would most likely turn into the size of a mountain, and in the sky above, I saw the blue, cloudy sky obscured by the enormous wings of a monarch butterfly. They cast a shadow that blocked the warmth of the sun. I stepped on the gas, driving on to the coast. Part 3. I drove for such a long time, sticking to old detours and shortcuts my father taught me about. It's funny how small things you didn't think you'd find helpful turn out to be the most helpful things you'd learn. He'd always wake up super early. He got up in the morning to tell us it was time to hit the road. We'd always enjoyed going to the beach in South Carolina, but my lead made sure to take the roads less traveled. "Looky there," he'd say. "No traffic jams and nothing. Clear road for miles ahead." We were also up super early, so there wasn't any sunlight either, but my dad had an early work, and these clear roads were anything but clear. They were rough and bumpy. The whole ride felt like our asses were getting tenderized beneath us like steaks. Our organs were practically getting shifted around with every groove and rough spot the car struck. I never thought my dad's little vacation habits would ever come in handy, but here I am, sticking to the back roads. I drove on for hours, and I only stopped for gas or the occasional snack. For the longest time, the back roads were a safe bet. Bugs had outgrown their natural habitat of the trees and mud, and instead resorted to overtaking the bigger places they could take refuge. Houses, great big buildings, and other shit like that. I listened to the radio, and hundreds of people called in talking about what they were witnessing. The host used to be a colorful Howard Stern type of guy, Hank Holstetter, and had a crude motto of "Crank it to Hank," with a face of his big shit-eating grin. He wore bright-colored clothes and 3D glasses, and he had a gap between his teeth. He had a bit of a lisp, now that I come to think of it. Hank, in the wake of the bug's growth, had taken on a much more somber tone. His much more goofy persona had become a voice of reason in the new world. He talked about routes to take to get out of the bug zones, where shelters were, and yes, he'd still play music. But what people did the most was sort of vent what they went through to Hank. He'd gone from a funny man to a sort of radio therapist where folks would vent their frustrations. The stories I heard on the way to the coast were disturbing, for obvious reasons. I thought I had it bad with the jumping spiders, but some of these were just fucked up. I turned on the radio and listened in.
"This is Hank Holstetter. You're live on air. What do you want to talk about?"
The voice belonged to a woman. She sounded hoarse and tired.
"I guess I've got a story to tell." "Well, we're open to everyone on air. We don't give a fuck about the censors anymore. Hard to find somebody when the country's gone to hell."
The woman chuckled, and then it turned into a sob.
"I'm just so tired." "We all are, baby. Take your time."
The voice was quiet for a few seconds, but then she started her story.
I had this lab. Her name was Judy, and I knew that she had flea problems every now and then. I didn't make a ton of money for my job, and flea and tick medicine was just so expensive, you know? "Sure do." "Well, I came back home from work really late one night and heard her whimpering, and I saw her on the rug shaking. I stroked her fur and felt a bunch of tough lumps. My first thought was tumors. She's an old girl, and I dreaded something like this happening. And I lifted up the fur. I saw these massive fleas swarming around in there. They looked like the size of silver dollars. Jesus Christ, they were fucking massive. I ripped them out of her fur with pincers, and I threw them to the ground and stomped on them. I plucked out 14 by the time I was done, and my girl looked at me with such tired eyes. She was relieved. I decided that in the morning, I was going to take her to a vet and have her wounds looked at. I fell asleep and sighed with a little bit of relief. But the next morning, I heard screams. I ran to my living room to see Judy on the floor, her skin bubbling and warping, the fur shedding from her body. Those little fuckers. They laid eggs inside her.
She began to choke up.
They tore her apart.
Then she couldn't hold back the tears anymore, and she just let it out. I just wanted to reach through the radio and hug her, man. She was in a lot of pain. Hank spoke up.
Oh, it's okay. What's your name, baby? Amber. Well, Amber, what are you doing now? I've decided to go north to Alaska with my cousins. They said that there haven't been any sightings of the bugs. I guess they're afraid of the cold. Good plan. And before I let you go, any requests?
There was a brief pause, but she gave him a song.
Atlantic City by Bruce Springsteen. It reminds me of home. Sure thing. Coming up is Atlantic City by The Boss.
As Springsteen's song scored my journey, I counted myself lucky so far. I was almost halfway to my destination. About an hour's worth of music was played before Hank interjected with another call.
You're living with Hank Holstetter. What do you want to talk about?
A gruff New York accent spoke up.
I work construction over in the Bronx, and everything was working fine at first. We were on the top of a half-built skyscraper, and I was looking over some blueprints when one of the guys pointed to the crane and said, "Fuck is that?" I walked up and looked over to the side of the building and saw that there was something dangling from the tower crane. It looked like it was the size of a football. I asked for somebody's binoculars so I could look at it closely. When I looked through it, I could tell what it was, alright. Fucking thing was a cocoon. And you know what? It should have been a red flag for me. But I just told them just keep at it. It wasn't hurting nobody or nothing. Then the next day, we look up at the building and notice the tower crane is hunched over the side now. We all immediately take the elevator up, and once we're up on the roof, we take a look at this fucking thing. It's huge now. It's like a goddamn car dangling off the crane. One of my guys tells me, "It's too heavy, man. We gotta knock it off somehow." So we just take some bricks and start chucking them over at the cocoon. It's embarrassing, but we've got shit aim. We're construction workers, not Red Sox. Would have taken you for a Yankees fan. With all due respect, fuck the Yankees.
They both laughed at that, but then the caller continued his story.
Oh, where was I? Oh, yeah. Well, one of the bricks actually hit the thing, and it made a large smack. The cocoon was tough, hard as a turtle shell. It didn't do anything. And what were we gonna tell the police? "Sir, there's a big butterfly stopping us from working." We could have been laughed out of the city, so we just worked and tried to ignore it. Nobody used the crane, of course, so we just stuck to other means of work on the roof. One guy decides to just forego any common sense and decides to work the crane himself. He moves it from side to side, trying to shake the cocoon off, but it just stays latched on. The other guys were shouting at him to get out of it, but he ignored us. The dumb prick shook the crane for about 2 minutes and then gave up. As he was climbing down and we accosted his dumb ass, we saw the cocoon start to shake. Then a leg shot out of the thing, then another and another. Then this fucked up wet thing just crawled out and it flexed out these 2 huge wings. I'm not gonna lie, they were beautiful. Vibrant oranges and yellows, it was something. But then it started to flap its wings. With one flutter, we felt a gust of wind, and then it started beating its wings faster this time, and it was so strong. Dust was getting kicked up, and then gravel, then bricks, and then...
He grew quiet.
I thank God every day that I was only blown down some stairs that led to the floor below. I heard the screams of the other guys as they were blown off the building. Their screams. They knew they were falling. And the worst part is, I could hear them hit pavement. After that, I called the police. But then we heard that it wasn't just us. The bugs were getting big everywhere. Everywhere else. Christ, what a day.
Hank chimed in.
Thank you for the story, friend. You got a name? Yeah, my name is Marco, and I want to give a shout out to the other guys who lived. Got any requests? Play some MF Doom. Doesn't matter which song. Thanks, Hank.
The song would turn out to be Rhymes Like Dimes. I had to hand it to Hank. He had good taste. I kept on, and I stopped at an abandoned gas station. I went behind the cashier's desk to turn one of the pumps on when I saw something scuttling around between the aisles. It was a giant cockroach that was digging into a bag of chips, its massive antlers waving about in the air. I tiptoed outside as the giant insect stuffed its face with junk food. I filled up the car and kept my head on a swivel, looking for any and all bugs that might be crawling or flying near me. Thankfully, none came. I counted myself lucky. I'd driven all this way, and the only bug I'd encountered thus far was a hungry cockroach. The last story I heard was that of a lineman in Arizona.
My name's Nate. Nice to hear from you, Nate. Now, what's your story? Yeah, it's not that long, but man, it made me shit my pants. I work the lines in my state. Sometimes you work the power lines in a neighborhood, and other times you'll be fixing the lines in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. I was repairing some lines in the middle of the desert, the sun beating down on me, and it was hot. I could feel my skin sizzling. My dumb ass forgot to put on any sunscreen, so I'm already in a bad mood, and I'm already tired as shit. And I was up in the lift when I saw something coming out across the horizon. At this point, I think I'm hallucinating. It was a black dot coming out of the desert, and it had to have been a mirage, but even after I drank my canteen of water, poured some on my scalp, I could still see it out there. The dark shape came closer and closer until the shapes became a little more defined, almost like adjusting the focus on some fancy camera. Then I understood what was coming out of the desert and coming towards me. The shiny black shell, the massive pinchers, and of course, the gigantic stinger that curled upward. It was a fucking scorpion, man. I pushed the down button, and when I tell you it was slow, I mean it was fucking slow. I just had to helplessly wait for this thing to get to level ground so I could drive off. But it was moving so fast. Every time I looked up from the control switch, it was like it just kept getting closer and closer. And the worst part is that it was so quiet. I couldn't even hear its footsteps. It wasn't even halfway through when I saw the thing so close and vividly. It would be on me in a few minutes. So I said, fuck it, and jumped to the ground. My legs hit the dirt hard, and my left leg crunched underneath my body. I leaned my body against the truck to stand myself up, and I tore the door open. I crawled in and started the truck. The stinger pierced through the roof and stabbed the passenger seat's cushion. I floored it, and I somehow ripped it off the bastard.
Hank chuckled and stated,
Give 'em hell. And how's the leg? Better, and thankfully this place is remote. No signs of bugs yet, but you never know. You stay safe out there. And do you have any requests for tonight? Yeah, play me Wood by Alice in Chains.
I drove on for a few more hours and watched the sun dip below the horizon, washing the skies in oranges and red. I was on the verge of sleep, but I kept pounding energy drinks like they were water. I wasn't taking any chances. I wasn't going to be someone who fumbles at the 10-yard line. I was going the distance. I put on my high beams and came across a sign that read, Welcome to North Carolina. I made it. I somehow made it all this way unscathed. I drove the rest of the way with my lights off and stuck to roads lit by streetlights. According to one of the callers, high beams attract moths. In fact, there was a lighthouse that was engulfed by a horde of them. It was a rough final stretch because I could hear the sounds of the military firing indiscriminately into the air, trying to shoot down the bugs that could fly as well as the ones that crawled. The world became a giant monster movie. I thought that I'd have to wait until morning before I could continue, but then I saw the docks ahead of me, and as if by some miracle, I saw an enormous yacht that had the name Samsa on the side. I grabbed my things and ran to the boat. The lights turned on, and I heard a voice shout,
"Who are you?" "My name is Bert. I talked to the owner, Tim, online."
The lights turned off.
"Come aboard. We sail at daybreak."
This yacht was massive. There were nearly 50 people in all, and it was almost like a miniature cruise liner. I was shown where I'd be staying, and despite the room's smallness, it was better than nothing. My back was ruined from driving so long, and I fell asleep immediately. I didn't even have any dreams. I just awoke to the morning sun peering into my room. I rubbed the crust from my eyes and walked to the balcony and looked at the boat coasting away from the shore. I could see the giant insects weaving in between the city buildings and the flying insects looming above like airships. All we had to do was wait it out, have the military fight them off, and then we could eventually return. Well, that's what we thought. I'm writing this as a goodbye because I don't know what'll happen next. Skimming out on the sea, gliding along at furious speed in the distance is a six-legged beast that is gliding on the ocean waters with ease. It was big, even on the horizon. Water striders are such fascinating insects. After being top dog on this planet for so long, who would have thought humans would go out like this? Bugs. Of everything on this little rock, it had to be bugs.